Life lessons. It's often been said that once you get a great education, you need to follow that up with experience. But to really build up on that experience, you reach a point of wisdom. Now, this is usually the tricky part for many of us in life because there's a perception that only once you're more senior in your years of life that you'll truly have the ability to tap into a pool of wisdom. But how about speaking to an audience of young individuals from various backgrounds to truly understand how their life experiences have shaped how they approach circumstances now, and most importantly, how it translates into the financial decisions that they take. This edition of the Liberty Blue Table sessions promises to be very exciting as we speak to a phenomenal number of guests who join me in my panel today. First up, we'll speak to someone who's a social entrepreneur, well-traveled, and even from her own failures has learned to empower other individuals in truly understanding how best to tap into their wisdom. Katleho Tsoku joins us, and Katleho, I'm looking forward to the contribution you're going to make in the conversation today. But for those who might not know you too well, give us some background as to who Katleho is, and most importantly, when last you felt that someone was truly in it with you.
Hi, Gugu. Thank you so much. My name is Katleho Tsoku. A social entrepreneur, a believer and a cheerleader of women entrepreneurs, and a recovering perfectionist. I think to your question, my mom is one person who's always been in it with me. And the most defining moment, however, is when I experienced my first failure. And she said to me, "Congratulations. You have tried for something, and that is something you ought to be proud of." So yeah.
Learning lessons from failure, which is quite important in terms of really building up into your pool of wisdom. And speaking of experiences which really build up one's ability to navigate life so much better and faster, we also have another phenomenal entrepreneur who operates within the space of communications, public relations, which often taps into the entertainment environment. Jay Badza joins us as our male contributor to this conversation. And Jay, we're all excited to hear a little bit more about your background, and most importantly, when last you truly felt that someone was truly in it with you.
Thank you so much, Gugu. My name is Jay Badza. I'm founder and head honcho at Orchard on 25. We are a fun, young brand marketing consultancy, responsible for delivering marketing strategies for interesting brands across the country. And for me, the time I felt somebody was truly in it with me was when I was starting my journey as an entrepreneur. And a friend of mine gave me such an amazing recommendation, which helped me to land a very big corporate client. And it really showcased to me that sometimes the small little things that you do without people watching, or while they are watching it without you knowing, can be able to influence some of the big moments that will culminate in a big break in your life.
The devil's in the details, they say there, Jay. So quite beautiful that you were able to reflect on that. And someone who knows all about details when it comes to numbers specifically, and even monitoring how people interact and change with their lives, is a certified financial planner and affiliated with Liberty in terms of offering customers a full view of how best they need to adequately plan for their lives. Maxine Muller, you join us today, and I'm really looking forward to getting more of your insight and maybe even some brief background as to how the recent nuptials have treated you. But give us more details as to who Maxine is, and most importantly, when last you felt that someone was truly in it with you.
Hi, Gugu. Thank you so much. I'm Maxine Muller, and I'm a Liberty Advisory Partner. And I feel that the moment for me was when I decided to say that I've got my degree, and Mom, I'm going to start my own practice. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to work for Liberty in a space where I'm actually going to make my own way and not just go the route of my degree in accounting. So when I told my parents that, they really, really were in it with me, and they were supportive right through all of it. Yeah.
A beautiful story, and one that I can relate to. So maybe not becoming a chartered accountant does have its benefits after all. Well, I'm excited about this conversation to really understand how education, experience really transcends into wisdom, and how we can actually build up on our pool of knowledge and take wiser decisions within our lives. And Jay, purely because you're the gentleman here in the room, I want to start off with you by really getting some perspective as to your experience thus far. You're well educated, You've got years of experience within the sector that you operate in, but COVID-19 and the lockdown came as the sucker punch that nobody saw coming. And it's impacted businesses across the board, everyone's day-to-day interactions with how they work. But overall, how has the first half of 2020 allowed you to become a lot more wiser? What have you learned from this experience?
Google entrepreneurship on its own is really crazy. So throw in a global pandemic in the midst of all of it, and then it just makes everything 10 times even harder. But I think from my experience, what I have learned is that you've got it in you. As an individual, as an organization, if your values are aligned, you can be able to withstand any hardship or any crisis that is thrown in your direction. And once the COVID lockdown was announced and it affected quite a lot of exciting things that we're rolling out for the year, we had to get into Plan B mode. And the reason why we have survived is because we were very quick to act and ensure that we understand how the rest of the world is responding to this crisis. And it really has helped us to survive when most businesses are really closing down on a daily basis. So you've got to be able to be quick. Of course, you're going to be depressed a little bit, but the most important thing and most important lesson for me is be quick to adapt and go with the flow.
Be quick to adapt. That's a very key lesson that you highlight. Katleho, as someone who also is an entrepreneur and you actively advocate for the participation of women in the economy, how have you responded to this crisis? I'm keen to understand what your change in views and opinions is and how it's made you a lot more wiser.
And I think really what Jay said about flexibility and adaptability, I think that's been a key lesson for everybody in this period. For me as a social entrepreneur, what I've observed is that this is such an opportune time for everybody to put human lives at the center of businesses and decisions that we make. I think for the longest time, and we speak of the new normal, we speak of how we used to do things in the past does not serve humanity, does not work in the current world that we're living in. For me, I think the biggest change has been how do we amplify social entrepreneurship, because there could not be a more opportune time for everybody to honestly put their attention on doing things better with a more humane approach.
Putting humans at the front of it all. And that's quite important because fundamentally without human life, none of us can be productive, none of us can derive any kind of income. And I do want to throw this to you, Maxine, because it almost seems as though you took the decision to be wise and displayed a wise decision years ago after getting your qualification and deciding that, hold on, instead of following the stream that's been set out for me and ticking off the boxes as they've been established, I'm actually going to take a different route here and decide to actually pursue an entrepreneurial journey, but with the support of a great large corporate to have my backing. How did that happen? And talk through the process in terms of balancing the dynamic of having a great education, but going pursuing the route that is less explored by many others.
Absolutely, Gugu, you've hit the nail on the head for me. It's definitely not the route taken, but I felt during my studies that there was something lacking with regards to what I wanted to do with my life. I could learn all the knowledge, I knew all the things to do, and I didn't just want to be another accountant. I wanted to impact people's lives, and I wanted to use my tax background, my company law background, all those assets that I have created through my education to impact other people's lives.
And that's quite bold, and I'm actually tempted to hear how you're doing it right now, because as both Jay and Katleho have mentioned, they've had to pivot, they've had to evolve, they've obviously had to take some very drastic decisions, but through it all, maintaining the human effect, right? And focusing on human beings. How are you managing in your interactions with many of your clients in terms of helping them take wiser decisions, Maxine?
So definitely making sure that we look at a holistic view at all times. Making sure that we listen more than we talk. I think that that's what I really bring to the table, and and we sometimes try to be fit the mold of what a financial advisor should be, of what the financial advisors that are going ahead of us. And I think that is where the wisdom really comes in, is being yourself and being able to listen, because you know what you're doing, you have the training, you have the necessary resources and skills and tools and a backing of a company like Liberty. But what you bring to the table and how you actually make an impact in people's lives is how you bring yourself. And that's been definitely a big part in how I can impact clients' lives, because they're so much more open to engaging and being real and telling me about what's actually going on in their lives.
I love what you mentioned about being real, and this one makes me want to flip the conversation on its head to actually reflect on previous experiences that our entrepreneurs have had. And Katleho, I want to direct this one at you. I can imagine through your education, through your networks, you had a wide and broad opportunity to interact with various financial advisors in your past life. And there's one particular business venture that you pursued in the hospitality industry, and things didn't work out as you had hoped and planned for. What were some of the key lessons from that experience that allows you to become a lot wiser? And now that you reflect on, in retrospect, you realize that even though you might have solicited the right advice, but maybe there were just some elements that you need to improve upon there. What were some of those key lessons for you?
I think the final lesson really is aligning your business to your purpose. Yes, it may seem very airy-fairy and spiritual, but I've learned, and with even entrepreneurs that I look up to, they always find a way to align their why, their North Star, to their business. And it's usually when you do that, that you do find success. And the biggest lesson for me with my restaurant was that it was actually here to serve me the clarity of my purpose. An expensive mistake, but one that has left me full.
And that's the point of mistakes, right? In terms of identifying what it is that you don't know. And that is actually the beauty of wisdom as well, is that you get to identify where your weaknesses are. And as a result, you build up on them. Jay, I'm excited to hear from your perspective what some of your key lessons and have been in life in terms of from past failures and how you've actually implemented them now going forward as we approach the second half of 2020, still managing the dynamics of COVID-19 and the lockdown in South Africa.
Gugu, I think for me, what has also really been incredible is that when you're starting a business, you've got to be invested in learning about, the directions and the routes and the failures of people who have done it before you. So I think what I found very interesting and what really worked for me is the fact that I didn't want to learn from my own mistakes. So I have always observed and I've always referenced other entrepreneurs and their stories, and then been able to avoid making the same mistakes that they're able to make. One of the biggest mistakes that I think people make is that, starting a business is often an emotional decision. But it actually requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of funding. It requires, a lot of networking. So, when your boss upsets you because they haven't given you the raise that you are expecting, or probably you didn't, get the promotion that you really wanted, that is not a reason enough for you to go and start a business, because you've got to be able to give so much of yourself to the journey. And if you haven't really planned it properly, you're going to fail. So every time I saw somebody starting a business and failing at it, I knew that there is something as important as knowing the right time to start. And for me, that was the biggest and most exciting and most important lesson of my journey.
I'm glad you responded to that, Jay, because I was about to ask you, what do you do with all the plans you have once you get thrown with a curveball? How do you move from plan C to FG and maybe even ST? Exactly. Actually, I was quite right. But how do you transition? And I ask this because you don't work alone. You are leading individuals in your company. They feed off of your energy and your leadership. And sometimes, whilst you might have your eye on the prize, it can be very difficult to encourage other people to share the same vision that you have. So how have you done that to make sure that as the plans continue to change, as you need to evolve, you take the rest of your team with you on that journey?
I think we very often underestimate the power of vulnerability. And there's so much power when you allow yourself to truly be seen, because as you said in the beginning, Gugu, this was a curveball that nobody expected. So in as much as, you know, you can be the CEO or the founder of a business or in management, at that point, all of us would, you know, it felt like the odds were never rigged in our favor. And I learned in the two organizations that I was part of that the minute we allowed ourselves to be human, the minute we allowed ourselves to be vulnerable and let your team be a part of that, it opened the space to be a space of creativity. You know, going back to actually, why did we start this? What is the problem? What is the mission that brings us here together? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And in that moment of vulnerability and being authentic, it allows then an opportunity for creativity to now have everybody, I suppose, bring in their ingredients to this cocktail. And that is why, you know, both organizations I'm part of, yes, we have had to pivot, but it was as a result of everybody contributing and, yeah, simply, as I said, never underestimating the power of vulnerability, especially at such unprecedented times.
I love how we go back to the human connection and human activity in terms of transparency and vulnerability that yourself and Jay have mentioned. And Maxine, I want to throw this curveball at you here, especially in bringing it back to the theme of wisdom and making sure that we are wiser and more critical of the decisions that we take. All four of us here have academic qualifications, very technical, whether they're in accounting or marketing or within the hospitality sector. And in none of our qualifications do they teach you the art of vulnerability, of transparency, or even bringing in the human connection. And I can just imagine how this makes your job as a financial advisor so much more difficult in tapping into following the textbook approach of doing your work, but most importantly, still speaking to the heart of the clients you serve. How do you do that?
Absolutely, Gugu. That's definitely my job. I think that what both Jay and Katleho has said is open communication, being vulnerable, making sure that your clients understand that you're not here to tell them, I told you so, you should have put that emergency fund in place. You're not here to tell them, this is why we had this discussion 3 months ago. You're here to tell them and really show that you are in it with them, to make sure that there's a solution to every problem that comes up. I joke with some of my clients, I've been through 4 girlfriends with you, or I've been through so much, and that is exactly what my job entails. It's really being in it with you on your journey of life. And when the highs are there, I'm there. When the lows are there, I'm also there. And I'm not there to take money away from you, I'm bringing it most of the time. So definitely trying to just be open with them and communicating with them at all times, making sure that it's a dual relationship where you're not telling someone what they need to do, you're making them see it from a technical and knowledge side, and then making that decision finally and ultimately for them, because that's when they really just accept the plan wholeheartedly and commit to it and see financial freedom as attainable. Definitely.
I love the nuggets that you're sharing here in terms of the life story and the journey that you embark upon with your clients. We are going to wrap up with our concluding remarks, and I thought I should highlight how ironic that whenever we talk about wisdom, we think that you need to have a lot more gray hair than all of us here on the panel in order to be wise, to share a sense of wisdom. But I think through much of what we've highlighted, we've all indicated that aside from the education, aside from the experiences, we've all tapped into a certain aspect that has made us a lot wiser in the decisions that we take. And Katleho, I'd like to throw this back at you as we start concluding remarks here. But what are your closing remarks that you'd like the audience to grasp in terms of understanding that they can transcend their experiences and really use that to propel them to make wiser financial decisions in their lives?
I think in my 35 years of existence, well, turned 35 this year, so COVID really messed up a milestone year. But anyway, I think for me, the big lesson, obviously, you know, having started my first entrepreneurial pursuit at 25, it became sort of this big thing. Can you top this thing? Can you, and obviously, it closed 2.5 years later. And the big pressure I've always had is what's the next big thing? Because, we always try to, I guess, overachieve, and for me, the biggest lesson has been give yourself the permission to work at the pace of your soul. I think we need to release the pressure of chronology, because everything happens at the right time when it's meant to happen. And I think when you're able to work at the pace of your soul, it helps you define success in your own terms. And that also means defining what financial freedom looks like for you.
I love that line that you use there. That's allowing yourself to work at the pace of your soul, something that a lot of us need to be more intricate about. Jay, your closing remarks in terms of making sure that we build up on our experiences to really influence wiser financial decisions.
I think for me, the main thing that I've learned along the line is this exciting African proverb that often says that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go further, you go with others. So what has really been important for me has been keeping a close network of incredible individuals surrounding this journey, because entrepreneurship is really tough, and you're going to need to draw from other people in order for them to be able to support your vision, in order for them to connect you to other people. And I think that we often underestimate the power of networking. You've got to be able to make sure that you are networking across, because opportunities can come from anywhere and anyone, including your peers. We all want to be able to sit at the table with the CEO, but the CEO has got very tough decisions that they've got to make. And sometimes it's actually somebody who is sitting in the middle or at the bottom of the food chain that we ignore, who can be able to open a door and be able to change the trajectory of your career or your business. And that for me has really, really been fundamental, because it made me realize that no man is an island. I need to be able to hold the hands around me in order for me to be able to reach major milestones in my career.
Fantastic. Maxine, I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
Make sure that you are present, because you are exactly where you need to be. And even from a financial planning perspective, you are where you need to be. Financial planning is for everyone. You don't need all of the assets or all of the money or all of your ducks in a row before you start a plan. This is what is going to get your ducks in a row. So when you start actually thinking about earning that first paycheck, look into how to budget, look into how we can actually get things going. And it doesn't have to be the best, most comprehensive plan. I think starting is all it takes, because then you really know where you're going.
I think one key element that we've certainly learned here today is that in as much as you might be able to rack up the accolades and academic qualifications, but it's the life lessons that truly set individuals apart to make them more wiser about the decisions they take. Displaying vulnerability, showing transparency, having clarity within your planning, and also working at your own pace all lead to the realization that no experience is in vain. Everything counts for your ultimate development and those around you. Well, we thank you so much for your participation in the conversation today. To my panelists, Katleho Tsoku, Maxine Muller, and of course, Jay Badza, thank you so much for your participation in the conversation today. We've certainly had a blast on this edition of the Liberty Blue Table Sessions.